Yo and hello my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the League of Fantasy Legends podcast. My name is Chris Benedict, aka Pistons Wish. I'm your host as we've got another awesome episode today. We are going to welcome another guest. This guest is going to give us a little bit of a different perspective because unlike our last two guests, he has not been watching LCS for the past 6 years. He's actually just started this year, and he started because of a fantasy league that I made him join. It's my brother. He goes by ObeseCookie. What's going on, man? What's up?
Hello. Nothing much. Everything you said is true. I am a newbie.
Yeah, but that's awesome because, you know, when we've been watching for this long, we get all these biases. Like, in my brain, Bjergsen's always going to be awesome because he's been awesome for so long, but you're not going to have that same problem. So I'm kind of looking forward to your perspective on some of this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Fresh brain.
So, that's right. I made you start playing League a long time ago. How long have you been playing?
Shoot. Probably just a couple months after you were so obsessed with the game immediately. I had to play it.
Okay, so, easy.
2016?
Yeah.
6 years ago?
Yeah, high school for you.
High school, yep.
How about Fantasy LCS? Like, have you played it before this year?
No. So, like you said, you made me play one because you were starting this awesome podcast.
That's right.
And that was my first time. And, of course, I didn't know any of the player names. So it was kind of weird at first, just going off the rankings. But now that I did the summer split this year, I still don't know them all, but knew most of the names and who I wanted to draft. So it made it a lot more fun.
Yeah, have you developed a favorite team?
Actually, so I think last split, I would say my favorite team was FlyQuest, just because there's kind of a lot of hype behind them.
Uh-huh. I think there still is, though.
Were they not supposed to be good last split?
They weren't supposed to be good this split either, and they still are.
Okay. So, for some reason, my favorite team has kind of become the 100 Thieves, just because I have a lot of their players on my fantasy team.
Okay, fair enough.
Which is, I think, pretty natural. But, yeah, 100 Thieves is probably my favorite team, and I like FlyQuest as well.
Yeah, FlyQuest is one that my heart has gone to. I'm not really sure why, but I just like them. I just root for them every game. So you are in our Dynasty League 2 that we've talked about a couple times on this podcast. Do you like your team there? You went for a bit of a different strategy than the rest of us.
Yeah, I kind of realized that part of having a good LEC and LCS team is just getting players on good teams. So I kind of just stacked my team with players from good teams, which happened to be 100 Thieves and Excel. So that's kind of my entire team are based off two teams, which is a little different than others.
So I think in the first week, your team was horrible because XL was bad.
Yeah, I think I got the least points.
And then this week, your team was awesome because XL and 100 Thieves were both awesome.
Yeah. I knew it would happen. Hopefully I get more of those weeks than the alternative.
Well, we're both 1-1, so we'll see how it continues to go. Anything else you want to bring up before we kind of get into it?
Not really.
Well, let's do it then.
Okay,
so did you hear the news of the LCS rosters that came out? Like, literally just a couple hours ago they came out.
Yeah.
So
that was kind of weird. Just in this past year I've been doing fantasy, I've never seen a trade.
Yeah, so the trades usually happen like in the off season. Kind of weird for it to happen, especially this late in the split. Like we're past the halfway point. But so we have River, if you've missed it, River got traded to Golden Guardians from Dignitas, and that's really all we know. So we're not really sure what Dignitas got back. I haven't heard anything about Pride Stalker. I assume that River is going to be starting, and I assume right away because it's not like they have time to waste. And then I don't know who starts at jungler for Dignitas. Their academy jungler is XIU or XU. Don't know anything about him, to be completely honest. And then finally, I don't know how Sleeper is going to handle a trade like this, because typically, if you had Pride Stalker and he gets benched, you just get points for his replacement. But people own River, So I don't know how it's going to work. Do you have any thoughts on how River is going to do, or how Golden Guardians is going to do with River?
Yeah, so this is River's first year in the LCS, coming from Korea, I believe.
Well, he is Korean, but he played for PSG, so you think he was in the... I'm not even sure what the league is.
Okay.
The PCS?
Regardless, his English is not as fluent as you would hope for as a new teammate to be able to build chemistry.
I've heard that, and so you wonder, like, how well is communication going to go with new teammates?
Exactly. It's going to be hard for them to communicate and build that chemistry for their team, because we all know League is a team game.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of time. Top 8 teams make the playoffs in North America. They're currently sitting 7th, but they're only 1 game out of 9th. So everything's kind of still up in the air. They're definitely going to have to get some wins. It's not like they can just coast to playoffs. So really interested to see how that will go. The other bit of news, TSM making another roster change, which I just can't believe they keep doing this. But Sol, their top laner, who just moved up 2 weeks ago, is going down to Academy, and apparently it's because he asked to go down to Academy, which is wild to me. Like, if you've got the chance to be in this top league, why wouldn't you stay there? Seems like from TSM's note, they still believe that he's the long-term answer at the top lane for TSM, but kind of a weird thing. It'll be Solo coming up into the LCS. He's been playing on the Academy team the last couple weeks. He's been around a long time. Any thoughts about Sol asking to be demoted to Academy?
That's just kind of weird. I feel like if you think of that in any other sport, like, that's just not something that ever happens. I would wonder what the motive is behind that. Maybe he just doesn't trust in his team, and he's going to have worse scores than he believes he should be getting, so he wants to look better. I don't know.
Yeah, I would almost think, like, asking to play on the JV team if you're like a high school basketball player, but even that would be because on varsity you're not playing. Like, he was going to be playing
True.
every game, so maybe he just thinks he's not good enough yet. I don't know, it's weird. So we'll go ahead and get into the recap of last week. Bit of a weird week. We had 100 Thieves, FlyQuest C9, all go 2-0, TSM, Dignitas, Golden Guardians 0-2, and then the rest of them, CLG, Immortals, TL, EG 1-1. It was a bit of a weird week. It didn't seem like there were any huge weeks, mostly because all the big weeks came from teams that went 1-1 in their win. I should say all the big games. Team Liquid's first game had great scores, and then they faded. EG's first game was awesome. Game 2, not so much. And then the opposite for CLG. Their game 1, horrible. Game 2, awesome. A couple duds. Do you have any people you feel like just were bad this week?
Yeah, watching those games over. One, Biofrost from Dignitas.
Sure.
Jinx gets that triple kill, and next team fight next to the Dragon, I think he was playing Rakan. I don't know if you remember that well.
Uh-huh.
Goes in on the enemy team and kind of just leaves Jinx there for the Gnar to come and kill, and then they just instantly lose that fight.
If I remember right, this Jinx was kind of fed.
She was fed.
The Gnar was also kind of fed, and then it was just a 1v1 with everyone else doing their own thing.
Yeah,
like peel for your fed Jinx. Come on.
Yeah. So that play stuck out to me, and I don't necessarily know if it's Biofrost's fault or just like pointing out one person instead of the team, but right. I saw him go in and then ult the enemy team while his Jinx was stuck behind, just getting slaughtered by Gnar.
That's really too bad.
Also, I think it's pronounced Olay. Could not dodge anything. Did you see how many times he got popped by Talia? Back to the team. It was just like, all right, now it's a 4v5, I guess.
That game, we'll talk about it later, but that game tilted me so bad. Like, so bad. So, obviously, the teams that went 0-2, their scores were all horrible. That's Dignitas, TSM, Golden Guardians. You're probably not expecting too much from them. Golden Guardians, maybe. The other teams, not so much. CLG, game 1 was awful. Like, maybe the worst fantasy game we've seen. Doklo went 0-7-0, which went for a score of negative 5.47. It's the worst game of the split, minus 5.5. Palafox was also negative 2. He went 0-4-0. The team was all bad, but they got redemption in game 2. So as we move to the top performers of the week, Game 2 CLG is the first one on my list. Palafox, people are calling him Palafaker on the Azir.
I heard that.
Just kind of destroying Bjergsen over and over. He had the Azir game. He scored 45. I thought that was kind of an incredible performance from him. Anyone you had that stuck out to you?
Well, I actually had Palafox Game 2 down as well. One, it sticks out to me because I have him in both my normal fantasy league and the Dynasty one on my bench, so love to see him playing well. I mean, obviously, Takui sticks out to me with his ult into the team, hitting a fat Everfrost, and deleting all of them at one time.
I think they all died to the same Q.
Yeah, it was a flash Q, and they just triple kill instantly.
You know, Takui is one, especially this week. Obviously, he won LCS Player of the Week. He was awesome. I think he was a case of better in real life than in fantasy. His fantasy scores were fine, 32 and 28, but that's not what you're looking for a guy that goes 2-0. But definitely he was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, without fantasy, if you look at the team fight for, I believe it was for Elder, he was almost picked but got away and dragged the entire team to the bot lane turret while his team just got Elder and then fought and, Elder OP in the team fight. Yes. And then they instantly won after that.
Especially when they're grouped as 5 with a fat Gwen flank. Like, just no chance.
Yeah. But somehow in all that, he got, 3 kills in the first game? Something like that?
I think that's it.
Yeah. But, so for fantasy, FBI, I would say, is my fantasy MVP. Even though he didn't score the most, I have him on my team, and he kind of hasn't been what I expected. He's been okay, but drafting him, I think I drafted him for second overall. I know the answer. You drafted him second overall because I was third overall, and I was really hoping to get FBI.
And then I took a big sigh and I picked Danny, so it worked out.
Yeah, but yeah, he scored me a lot of points. I think he brought it up in a different podcast. I picked him for Lucian when FBI and who he had their Lucian.
You freaking obliterated me.
Yeah. Got me an extra 60-something points.
Yeah, you nailed those picks that week.
Yeah. But ever since then, he's been just below what I expected, but he really had a great week this week. Him and his entire team, honestly.
Yeah, I'm looking at the stats. Takui, his combined KDA this week was 5, 1, and 12. So only 5 kills despite winning player of the game both games. Kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And then looking at the rankings. So FBI, 28.1 points per game. That's good for third, but it's a full 9 points per game behind Danny. So he's been okay. I mean, third is only 1 spot below what you were expecting, but not great. Anyone else stick out to you?
That's what I had. I had Takui, FBI, and Palafox Game 2.
Yep. Yeah, I think the team, fantasy-wise, that was the best was the team that real life. I was listening to a podcast that called this the worst 2-0 week in the history of the LCS, and I totally agree. If you watched the C9 games, both of them were disgusting. First one against Dignitas, second one against Golden Guardians. The Golden Guardians game. But they got the wins, and the nature of a huge comeback game is that you're going to score well. Like it always happens on the big comeback games. Berserker, 30 and 34. Blabber, 23-39. Fudge, 21 and 33. So really nice scores. And that brings us to the LFL Pod Fantasy Player of the Week. This week it goes to Jensen. Jensen had a really nice week, despite some of the team problems they had. Really nice scores from Jensen. Started the week on the Orianna game. He went 3-1 and 5 for a respectable 30. But in game 2 on Sunday against Golden Guardians, he played the Talia, which we were talking about this before we started recording. Just seems really broken right now. Like we've seen a couple of crazy Talia games where it's just so much DPS. The Takui game where he felt like he just didn't miss a fling. And then same thing with Jensen catching Ole over and over that you already talked about.
Yep.
He went 7, 0, and 11 for a 51. And the truth is that C9, because they were so far behind, they didn't get a lot of the objectives that give you the bonus points on Sleeper. So that could have been higher if they would have gotten more early dragons, which they didn't get. All right, we're going to move right into our power rankings next. We're going to rank the teams going backwards, starting with 10, ending with 1, comparing mine with my brothers, seeing where we match up, where we agree, and where we don't. I'll go ahead and start with my 10th place team. I have it down as TSM. TSM had a pretty brutal week, made another roster change. I hesitated because with River leaving Dignitas, I think he was their best player. I'm not sure if I still feel the same way about TSM versus Dignitas, but I have both of them 10 and 9. I think they're pretty clearly the two worst teams, which is kind of crazy since, 2 episodes ago we were calling Immortals the worst team in fantasy LCS history. But they've really turned it around. So I have TSM 10, Dignitas 9. What do you have?
I actually have Dignitas 10, TSM 9. And my logic with that is, first of all, Dignitas 2 and 9, TSM 3 and 8. But even
That's
with
fair.
Just this week, I mean, they both looked pretty bad. But Dignitas in that FlyQuest game just never had anything. I get C9, it was an ugly game, like you said, and they lost. But I'm really picking out the FlyQuest one, where so many times during that game I was thinking to myself, what does this team do? So it might be a little recency bias on the Dignitas, but yeah, that's why I have them lower than TSM.
I think it's fair. I think either of those, 10 and 9, I think they're pretty clearly the two bottom teams. I think for the most part, in general, in an 8-team fantasy league, those are the players you want to leave on the waiver wire. I don't think you're wanting to play those players unless you really have to, some extenuating circumstances, which we may talk about later. Number 8, Immortals. I think this one we probably have the same, although they've looked a lot better this week than they have the last few.
Yeah, they definitely got some of their mojo back after looking so horrendous earlier this split.
Which I'm excited about, because I was excited about Immortals at the beginning of the split. I think I power ranked them either 6 or 7 to start the split, and so I was excited. Obviously, that excitement went away, but maybe peeking its head out a little bit. A couple nice games from them, so excited to see where they'll go, how Kenvi will continue to develop. I think Kenvi's a good pickup in a Dynasty League, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I drafted Power of Evil off the initial draft and had him for about 3 weeks, and I think it was under 20 points.
20
I might
20
be
total?
wrong. Total. It was disappointing.
Definitely. And so looking at the rankings right now, Power of Evil's last, but he's made up some ground. He's only about 1 point behind both Blue and Maple. Pretty clearly the bottom 3 mid laners, which you would expect based on their teams. Number 7, I have Golden Guardians, and this is where I'm going to get into that game that was so tilting. So C9 brings out the Kale top, and it gets wrecked. I mean, it got solo killed. Did you see the solo kill? Sejuani versus Fudge on the Kale.
Just remind me.
So Kale's level 3, and just kind of tries to run down the Sejuani, and just gets ignited and dies.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that. That was a weird play to see in pros.
For sure, and of course, Freak just yells, "Fudge, he has Ignite, you idiot." You idiot. That was horrible. And then he gets ganked, dies, he gets dove. He's so far, I think he's 2 levels behind at some point. Golden Guardians, they took a 22 or 23 minute Baron to be up. I think it was 8,000 gold at 22 minutes. And then they just could not finish. They just could not finish.
You gotta end the game quick against the Kale.
Yeah, and they just couldn't do it. I couldn't believe it. Anyways, a lot of good stuff coming from Golden Guardians. They had full control of that game, and they're just having so many problems closing games. I wonder if that is why they're bringing River in. They've identified that they just need someone. Maybe they need a shot caller who's going to tell them exactly where they need to go. Maybe they think Pride Stalker is playing too aggressively. But I really think Golden Guardians has a lot of good stuff going on. I think bringing River is going to be a good move long term, even if it causes some short-term growing pains. I'm pretty confident with them here at 7.
Yeah, I have them at 7 as well. That move is definitely interesting, especially because if doing this trade mid-season kind of hints that they're trying to make a playoff push. So they kind of would want that effect from the trade to happen instantly, which I'm not sure it will.
Right? 3 weeks, I think. 3 weeks they have.
Yeah.
Not a lot.
Not a lot. How many teams make playoffs?
8.
8? But there's 10 teams.
Correct.
Oh. All right, so they're actually in the playoffs right now.
So I looked up the playoffs for the LCS, which I'm looking at last year's. First and second seed get a bye to the second round. Third through sixth start in the upper bracket, so they are basically double elimination. And then seventh and eighth start in the lower bracket, so they'll get one chance and they're out. So really, you want to get 1 and 2, and you want to get to 6.
Okay.
Number 6 is where I think we might disagree. Finally, I have C9, which they're tied for 5th, so it's reasonable. But I don't think this is where most people are going to have them, just because of the expectations on their team. But we've already talked about it. I was incredibly unimpressed by their 2-0 week against weaker teams. Dignitas and Golden Guardians are teams they should beat. I had the Golden Guardians upset picked. Obviously, it almost happened, but it didn't. They've got a big week this week. They got FlyQuest and Team Liquid coming up this week. So it's going to be tough, and I'm not sure I really believe in them. And CLG has a much easier schedule. FlyQuest does not, but FlyQuest has a game or two on them. And so I'm a little worried about C9. I think this is the team that Golden Guardians is going to try to catch. I've got C9 at 6. How about you?
Yeah, I actually have CLG at 6. I love their hype coming in. They literally, I think 0 players were drafted in our league. From CLG, just because they were expected to be the worst, right?
0 players were drafted in our 8-team league.
Yeah, so I love the hype, but couldn't put them above C9, who just had a 2-0 week, no matter how ugly it was. There is something impressive about coming behind, because that's actually something in League that I'm definitely not good at, is when I go 0-2, I usually end 0-10.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have to both be patient, but also find your opportunities and take them.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's definitely tough.
So that's why I don't have CLG above C9.
Yeah, and I don't think that's wrong per se, but when I look at the standings, so CLG 6-5, C9 also 6-5. But C9 with a really tough schedule this week, CLG with an easy schedule this week. I think CLG might have a 2-game gap at the end of the week this week. But we'll see. 4, I really, really struggled with this. I so badly wanted to put TL4, but I could not bring myself to do it. I'm leaving FlyQuest here, even though FlyQuest seems to be on the up, Team Liquid seems to be on the down. FlyQuest hype has been there. They've been really good the last really 4 weeks, with the exception of that one random horrendous loss to TSM. But I'm still taking FlyQuest 4. I just think if they played today, I would choose Team Liquid. And so that's what I'm sticking with. Who do you have 4?
You know, I think every single week when you do these rankings, you're saying how you wish you put FlyQuest higher. I'm gonna
I think you're
I'm
right.
gonna do it for you, and I'm gonna put FlyQuest at 3, Liquid at 4. Maybe this is just because I'm new, but I feel like there's always been a lot of hype around Team Liquid, and they've always just, disappointed me when I watch them. They win, but it's not... I never am surprised by their gameplay. I feel like Hansama and Core JJ, I don't know. Maybe I think they're my least favorite team, so maybe that's why I'm a hater. But... yeah, Hansama for number 1 overall pick, I was expecting a lot more. Same with Santorin. I feel like I saw a lot of questionable plays by Santorin this week, especially. So I have Team Liquid at 4 and FlyQuest at 3 after a big week by FlyQuest too. That helps the ranking.
Definitely, and I think that's part of the reason I was excited to have you on here, because you don't have those biases in your head. You don't remember that Core JJ is the best support in the history of North American League of Legends. So you're just looking at this year. Yep,
I had no idea that was the thing.
Right, like Santorin's been around forever. Bwipo has all these ability to carry. They have so much talent in every lane. That's why they were the favorite to win the split. But specifically this split. They've been disappointing. They definitely have. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you placed them where you did.
It for you.
Yep. So I've got 100 Thieves 2. I've got EG 1. I think those are pretty self-explanatory,
Yep.
even though 100 Thieves just beat EG.
And
We're not going to go
fashion.
crazy and put them ahead.
He smoked them.
It was a weird game. I think the draft was weird for EG. The Kaisa kind of came out of nowhere. We haven't seen a Kaisa in 4 or 5 weeks, and it definitely looked kind of worthless, if you will. But the whole game turned on that fight at the Rift Herald, which was so close.
That was an awesome fight. That was fun to watch.
It was. And I think there are a couple things you really have to point out. If you go back and watch the replay of that fight, which is really all you need to see from that game, because the game's basically over at that point. But Abadage's Azir to start that, he put the Azir right in basically the entrance to the jungle from the river, and so nobody could get around it. And so what you see is 2 players flash over it, Danny flashes over it and someone else, and then 2 players have to walk all the way the long way. I know Vulcan did on the Nautilus, I don't remember who else, but it was such a good Azir that forced all these cooldowns, really separated the fight. But obviously the play everyone's looking at is it's not the revive. What do they call it? With the Renata.
I call it a revive.
It's not a revive. it's a
stay alive. I don't know.
Yeah, whatever it's called. It has a fancy name. I don't know it. But Inspired makes a huge mistake. He ease onto the already dead Azir, but it just barely doesn't stun him against the wall. And then Azir kills him and it gets revived. He gets the quadra kill. And when you're an Azir that starts 4-0 at whatever it was, 15 minutes, against a comp that is so short ranged, I mean, the Kaisa is so short ranged, the Poppy's just a tank, it just wasn't going to work out. And so I think the whole game turned on that fight. If that fight goes a little differently, I think EG has a chance. AG's been the best team the whole split. I'm not going to go crazy. They're definitely still one.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said.
Although I think we'd be wrong not to mention how 100 Thieves is doing. They've been really on an upward tear the last 2 weeks. I think they're 4-0 the last 2 weeks. Shawkin was on the podcast last week. He put them at 4. I called him crazy. I think they proved that he was crazy.
It was just some recency bias. Because they got smacked last week by FlyQuest.
And they had that game against C9 earlier in the split where they got wrecked. Yeah, I mean, they've been definitely up and down the whole split, but they are definitely up right now. All right, we're going to get right into our match-by-match previews next. We'll start with our games on Saturday. We'll go game by game, look at the Vegas odds, give our picks, and some of our favorite fantasy plays from the week. I'm still playing the DraftKings DFS games. I recommend them. First game of the week, we start out with what I think is the best game of the week with the most implications. That's going to give us the most information. It's FlyQuest versus C9. Vegas has C9 as the minus 155 favorite, kind of going against what the recency bias has been. I personally am taking FlyQuest here. I love FlyQuest. We've talked about it this whole episode. I don't love C9. We also talked about that. I think that FlyQuest is going to take them here, and I like them for fantasy too. What do you think?
I think your logic makes a lot of sense, but I also think that FlyQuest can beat and lose to anyone from what I've seen. And I just feel like this is a C9 game. I think it's time, after a 2-0 week by FlyQuest, I think they lose this one, actually. Just gut feeling.
Both teams went 2-0. I think if you were to take a poll on the player of the week last week, I think the top 2 players are Takui and Jensen, so I'll be really excited to see that matchup. It's going to be a fun one. This one is definitely one I've circled to not miss. The second game, it's Dignitas versus 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves minus 500 favorites, and that's probably before the Dignitas news since I made this outline today. I think that Dignitas had no chance before this news, and I think they have even less of a chance after this news.
Yep. I completely agree.
Historically, Dignitas has kind of had 100 Thieves' number, but I just see no chance. Third game is TSM versus Team Liquid. Team Liquid minus 360. I also think TSM has no chance. Another top lane roster change. They looked pretty bad last week. How about you?
Yeah, I think Team Liquid will pull away with this one. As much as I want to pick TSM, there's no logical reason to.
Yeah, and TSM kind of on a downswing. If they lose to TSM, that's when the warning bells really go
yeah.
off because of how bad TSM is. But nonetheless, next game, Golden Guardians versus CLG. CLG's slight favorites, minus 134. What do you think?
I think that number is actually pretty generous to Golden Guardians. I mean, they went 0-2 this week. CLG had a good win, disregarding their first game of the week, but
Their absolute thrashing by EG.
But everyone's got to get thrashed by EG eventually.
Correct.
But I'm going to go CLG on this one.
Yeah, there's a part of me that wants to pick Golden Guardians. I think whenever you get a new player, a roster change, especially a player like River coming in, it's going to inject some energy. But I also think they're probably going to have some coordination issues, which this far into the split is going to be tough, especially with how well CLG's been playing together. I'm definitely going CLG here. Last game is EG versus Immortals. Immortals has been looking better. EG still minus 500 favorites. Do you give Immortals a chance?
No. Simple as that. Not as ridiculous as it would have been maybe a couple weeks ago. Like, in EG's favor. But I still don't think they have a chance.
Yeah, IMT, they've had 2 games where they get 0 kills. They've had 2 more games where they barely got a kill. But they're not the same team now that they were then. That being said, Evil Geniuses is the best team. I don't think there's really any room for discussion here, unfortunately. Seems like 2 close games and 3 blowouts this week. Moving to Sunday. Sunday, first game, TSM versus Golden Guardians. Golden Guardians, slight favorites, minus 155. I'm taking Golden Guardians. I think this is where River gets his first win on his new team. I don't mind Golden Guardians players in fantasy. I think they'll do well. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. Both of these teams have been not very impressive, but I think Golden Guardians has been a little bit less of that. So I'm going to go Golden Guardians.
I think Golden Guardians, when they've been good, it's looked better, and I think they've looked better in their losses. Like they haven't had many games this year where you're just like, wow, they suck. It's like most of the time they're doing pretty well. What a huge mistake they made. Second game of the week is another fun one. Evil Geniuses versus FlyQuest. EG minus 200. Where are you going here?
I want to say FlyQuest. I really do. I feel like they can beat anyone. Like, they can beat Evil Geniuses. But I don't think this is the week for them. I think I'm going Evil Geniuses on this one.
Yeah, you're predicting an 0-2 week for Fly. Kind of getting stuck in the mud this week. I picked FlyQuest to win the first game. I think they'll make this one close, but I think EG's team fighting's just too good, and I think as long as they don't draft themselves into the same hole that they did against a 100 Thieves, I think they'll be fine, and I think they will take this one. Game 3, Team Liquid versus C9. Team Liquid minus 155 favorites. Kind of the rivalry game here, the Jensen revenge game. What do you think?
Oh, I'm going C9. 100%.
All right.
I'm pretty confident C9 is going to beat.
All right, I like the confidence. Jensen's going to get some revenge versus his former team.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Bjergsen versus Jensen, obviously the classic mid lane matchup. We saw it for years when Bjergsen was on TSM, Jensen on C9 before he was on TL. I always think of the Jensen Echo game where he forgets to press R in game 5 on Echo. Not that he forgets, but he gets CC'd. Yep. You probably don't know this one.
I don't.
I'm gonna send you the YouTube video because it's like the defining moment of Jensen's career in a negative way. Like everyone always thinks of this play. I'm taking Team Liquid though. I think that they're gonna bounce back this week. I think everyone's been talking smack on them, and I think they're gonna right the wrongs. Game 4 this week, Immortals versus 100 Thieves. 100 Thieves minus 450. So pretty heavy favorites. Immortals with the brutal schedule to get EG and 100 Thieves. Do you give them any chance?
I was going to say, this is a tough week for Immortals. 2 best teams. But with this game, I'm going to go 100 Thieves. And I don't have much thought about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I want to pick Immortals, or at least I want to say that Immortals has a chance against these 2 teams, but I just don't believe it. I don't. Last game of the week, it's Dignitas versus CLG. CLG minus 220. Dignitas with no river. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm going to go CLG for the 2-0 on the weekend. Yeah, Dignitas, I have them ranked the worst team, and I don't think they'll win a game this weekend, so I'm going to go CLG.
Yeah, I totally agree. CLG has the opposite of Immortals. They get Golden Guardians and then Dignitas. It's really nice. I'm definitely taking CLG to win this one as well. So we'll finish up the episode here. We're going with a lock of the week and a fade of the week. I will start with my lock of the week. We kind of just alluded to it. CLG has the schedule this week that you want to target. We talked about them last week. They had the schedule of death. They went EG and then TL. They actually beat TL. I think that's going to give them a lot of positive momentum going into this week. This week, they get Golden Guardians, they get Dignitas. I think they win both of those pretty easy. They get Golden Guardians with River, Dignitas without River. I think they win both games easily. I think we get a top 3 performance from pretty much every player on CLG. And I think we have the potential for Palafox, Dokla, Contracts, even Luger to be the top scoring player at their position on the week. What do you got for lock of the week?
Lock of the week, I'm going to have C9 going 2-0 on the weekend. Kind of pulling off 2 upsets, I think. Were they? They're not favored against FlightQuest, are they?
According to Vegas, they are. But I think if you were to take like a poll of people who watch, they probably are not.
Okay. Regardless, I'm going to say C9 goes 2-0 on the week. I know that's a weird timing because this past weekend they looked so bad, but I think they're gonna.
But they went 2-0.
They won. So I think they're feeling pretty good that they won. Maybe a little bit confidence booster. They can step it up this weekend against some better teams. And then I'll go with the top 3 performers. I'll go Fudge and Jensen will be on there. I think Fudge, he got me. I have Fudge on my fantasy team. His Gangplank week, I don't think it wasn't this past weekend, but the week before.
No, it was the week before against TSM.
Yeah. I think we're going to see another Gangplank, and I think we're going to see a lot of points.
I like it. So between Fudge and Dokla this week, who do you choose?
Fudge.
Yeah, I take Dokla. We need to bet on that, I think.
All right, $5.
All right. Fade of the week. I have Immortals. And I love Immortals. I've said that a lot. I like what they're doing. They've looked better. And that's going to fool you into thinking you should pick them up, drop your TSM players. And I think you should do that. But you should not do it this week. They get Evil Geniuses and 100 Thieves. I think Immortals are the worst play this week. I would drop them for any other team, and then next week pick them back up because they're going to win some games at the end of the split. It's just not going to be this week. What's your fade of the week?
Yeah, that fade makes a lot of sense with their brutal schedule, but I'm going to take a different route, and I'm going to fade Dignitas. One, because I think they're the worst team right now. Like we said earlier, they lost their best player, River.
Mm-hmm.
Their schedule isn't the easiest, so they're going against 100 Thieves on Saturday and then CLG on Sunday. And I don't think either of those games are going to be necessarily close. So I'm going to fade all Dignitas players.
All right, so you have a gun to your head, and you have to start one, and it's either Power of Evil or it's Blue from Dignitas. Who do you choose?
Yeah, that's a tough one, but with a gun to my head, I'd probably go Power of Evil.
All right, so we got 2 $5 bets.
I just don't trust Dignitas. And yes, I accept your $5 bet.
That's fair. We got 2 $5 bets. We will let you know how these bets go. Last questions before we wrap up the episode. Who do you think wins the split?
Oh, man. I think I'm biased. I think if 100 Thieves plays like they did this weekend, they could win the split. Although it's going to be tough with Evil Geniuses. I think it's going to be one of the two for sure. But I'm going to say 100 Thieves.
I like it. Going away from the consensus.
That's right.
I think it could happen. That was the Spring Split final matchup. Obviously, EG got the sweep there. We'll see what happens. What 3 teams go to Worlds?
So I'm going to stick with Evil Geniuses and 100 Thieves. And then the third one, I think, is the tough one for me. Because there's a couple teams that could.
Most people have been choosing between Team Liquid and C9. But you might have something different.
I did say C9 would go 2-0 this week. But I'm going to say, after FlyQuest goes 0-2 this week, I'm going to say FlyQuest makes it to Worlds. Because I think they're a good team. I just think they're a little inconsistent.
Yeah. I hope you're right. Would be excited to see them there. Takui is one of my favorite players. I really like Johnson as well. And then Aframu kind of speaks for himself. He's a fan favorite and for a reason. Last question. Worlds in North America this year. We got groups in New York. We got semifinals in Atlanta. We got finals in San Francisco. The summer split finals are in Chicago. Are you going to make it to any of these?
Well, Chicago for sure. I think we're having our little trip to Chicago for a weekend to watch the finals there, the summer finals.
It was a trick question. We're going together. We're going together.
It was a rhetorical question.
That's right.
To Worlds, I mean, I'm not opposed. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Shawkin, obviously our cousin, planning a trip to New York City, so hopefully that's something we can make happen. I'm going to spend all of my wife points. Like, if we go to New York, all of my wife points will be gone. I will be in the doghouse for a while, but I think it'll be worth it.
Always.
I think that's all we got for this episode. Anything else you want to chime in before we close up here?
No, I think we went through everything I wanted to talk about.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed having you on here. A little bit of a fresh perspective, less of the knowledge of the history of the LCS bogging down your opinions.
That's right. That's why we had a couple different opinions going down in the rankings.
That's why you hate TL.
That's why I hate TL.
That's why you hate TL.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And for those of you listening, thank you so much for tuning in. We really, really appreciate it. Follow us on Twitter if you haven't. It's at LFL Pod on Twitter. All of our episodes will be on YouTube. It happens automatically. I don't even have to worry about it. So check it out there. If you prefer that, it's the same as this episode. So if that's your medium you prefer, check it on YouTube. You can find that link in the description of this podcast or on Twitter. Follow us on your favorite podcast app if you don't mind. That's probably the best way to support us. Share it with your friends. We're having a great time, and I hope that we can continue to grow this podcast, to grow the game, and just continue having fun talking about Fantasy LCS. Thanks again so much for tuning in. This is Pistons Wish and ObeseCookie signing off. Peace out.